Just the tree first.
It'll be more. Yeah, got it.
And the dogs after that, right? And then we go into a break. I'm just making sure.
You're going to do it for the yeah. I think that's I thought you. I don't know how the operated like 30 years ago. Yeah. Yeah.
All right, it is a little bit past 9 a.m. Thank you. Welcome everyone for being here. Aaron Bruff from Utah State Board of Education, Director of Data and Statistics. Again, thank you for joining. I am waiting for one person to get here through traffic, but I think we're really fine and moving. He's that close, right?
That's what he said.
Okay. Okay, so it should be good. Again, welcome. Couple housekeeping announcements. Don't you have to stand up and come up here? Just get kind of close to the if you don't mind.
Yeah, if you're here, there are restrooms out that door straight down the hall for the break. And then there will be a little summit store that our Bridges Transition students run. It's next door here and it is cash only, but they have sodas and snacks. So if you want to support them, you can do that on the break. It'll be open.
Thank you. That's housekeeping for those who are in the building. Again, wonderful for those who are joining us. We do have the microphone is here on this owl. It has cameras set. I don't know if it's displaying for the individuals online. They can look at it. So just realize what this owl will do is as you're speaking, it focuses on wherever you're at and it'll follow you around. So it should be following me around for those who are online. I believe that's what it's doing. It also gives a 360-degree view. So just realize people online can see you. Just be aware of that. I can see you as well because I'm in the room and you can see each other, but just understand it is a hybrid setting. Hopefully this works. Because the owl is here, it does pick up the background noise. So while people are just, presenting, if we need to discuss, they can hear you, but they might not be able to hear you clearly. And if you want to argue with us and everyone will start shouting at the same time, everyone will hear you online, but they won't understand who's saying what. So just be aware and just don't do that. Anyway, Calista is online monitoring the chat right now. When she transitions, she'll be talking. I'll be sitting at her computer or Nicole, someone will be online making sure that we're getting all the notes. So feel free if you're online to go into the chat and share that any information. I saw a message on there. If you are running the presentation, all you need to do is come up here and advance on this computer. That one's broadcasting up to the display here. Just realize this computer is driving all the PowerPoint slides. So with that said, again, thank you. Welcome. We have 3 sessions today. Just kind of give you a general overview of what's happening. So our first session is going to be on USIMS. I'm excited for you guys to hear about this. Hopefully you're excited to hear about that. And hopefully the USIMS team is excited to share. They had their whatever yesterday was called. It was big. They've got all their programmers, all their developers, everyone in. We had multiple LEA representatives come in yesterday, talk about it. Fantastic meeting for those who are involved. So again, thank you for that. The second part of the training today is kind of it's a basics. So the second section is welcome to Data Gateway, welcome to Utrex, welcome to the submission. For the old timers, do your work during that time or pay attention, whatever. I'm just letting you know that that will be the second session. And then we'll be ending at 12 is the scheduled time. We'll take a lunch break for about an hour. When I say about an hour, and we'll start up again at 1. We'll be done at 3 or earlier.
One.
What?
10 minutes.
Okay, 1:10 is when we'll start up again, for those who are online. And then we'll be running, we have we are done at 3. Kind of scheduled today. We might get done before then or not. We'll get done before that. Or right at 3. So just letting you know schedule wise. Again, if you need a break, feel free to get up and if you're in this room, or where they're at. Okay, question.
Not questions, just the reason we'll be done at 3 is there's a dance troupe that's going to be using this room as a staging area beginning at 3 o'clock. That's why, unless you want to stay here and help with the staging for the dance.
Yeah.
You're welcome to.
I know we're all skilled in that side of your other life as well. But again, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. We know the sacrifice take you away from your regular work, but again, just having these data meetings, especially the data conference, we found incredibly valuable. And the feedback I get from all of you is this is valuable to have it. Sometimes I do miss the bigger ones where before COVID, where we'd all show up at the library or whatever, and it's like see people looking at their computers. Joking a little bit. Anyway, welcome and thank you. And I'll turn the time over to Katrina. And she will take us into USense.
Thank you, Erin.
Good morning, everyone. I am going to press buttons and see what happens. Let's see. If I press this thing.
Yep. Oh,
Look,
sorry.
you didn't tell people to mute their microphone and raise their hand and stuff. Oh, okay. All right. So first up, for some of you, my name is Katrina Brinkley. I'm the Chief Product Owner and Program Manager for USIMS, which is the Utah Schools Information Management System. Some of this will be a review for some of you, but in the spirit of keeping things basic, I'm going to go through really the basics of what USIMS is. And first off, we have why are we even working on USIMS? Right now, as I'm sure all of you are aware, USBE has a lot of systems available. You can see we have a crazy conglomeration of things. Each of these systems have their own login, they have their own user experience, they have their own databases, their own background, their own system configurations that they've been doing sometimes for 40 years. So we are taking all of this and trying to make it easier for all of you to use. Our goal is to really make USIMS one centralized location where you can get the information that you need and you can submit the information that you need to submit without going to 45 different places to do so. To do that, we had some legislative rulings, however we want to call those, 53E-3-518 that states that USBE will re-engineer our core data collections and reporting capabilities. So we're trying to do that in one place, make it as automated as possible. Yes, I have a question. We're having a hard time hearing you.
Uh-oh.
Is there a microphone? Especially when you turn to the screen. You're just showing her to you.
Button.
Oh, we're gonna mic me up that way. That's fine. Is that better? Okay, perfect. I'm sorry I wasn't talking loud enough for everyone. Is that still working for online? Calista, are we still good?
No, it's funny.
Okay, perfect. All right. Now I can hear myself and it's weird and echoey. All right. So USIMS, our goal is to be everything in one place. So you can get your data, you can submit your data, you can get the information that you need in one area. We're trying to automate as much as possible. So you no longer have to send CSV files to us on a daily basis, a monthly basis. We can make that so that we're actually working, and our teams are going to talk about it a little bit now, or in a minute, about APIs and ways that we can make this automated for all of you. We also are working on architecture. It's called event-based microservices architecture. Really what that says is we're making it so that we can be agile and we can accommodate what the legislature needs and what our users need in an easier manner. So and overall, we want to reduce the data redundancy. We know that a lot of you see a lot of the systems that we have, 5 of them have the same information in different ways, or they're interpreted in different ways or created in different ways. We want to help all of you get one place for your data. We want to help Erin's team in making their lives a little bit easier with some of the work that they do as well. And before I move on, I'm going to ask, are there any questions on what our goal is for USIMS? Cool. I don't see any hands up in here. Looks like nothing online. All right. How we're doing this, and Erin mentioned a little bit about what we did yesterday. We had a functional advisory board and some focus working groups. Some of you are members of our focus working groups, and we really appreciate that because we use our focus working groups to ensure that our system is created with all of you in mind. That our system is created with users who are currently in the thick of things and know how things work and how they could work better. And we love to hear that and take that feedback from all of you. So if you're not participating in a focus working group and feel like you have something to provide to us, please reach out to myself or Dawn or Mark. We have Hari and Baidu here as well. We're happy to get you invited to those meetings. All right, and this is our roadmap right now. I really share this to give kind of an idea of what we're working on and where we're going. I have a couple product owners here who are going to cover a little bit more information about their domains, so I'm not going to deep dive into this too much, but mostly I want to expose this to you. There's information here. I submit this to our board on a monthly basis, so it's in board backups if you ever have questions. We also have this in Lucid, and you can access it at any time and get information and updates. And this is our schedule for our focus working groups and our functional advisory board. As noted, we had one yesterday. We had a functional advisory board yesterday. Our next one will be probably in July. And if you'd like to be invited to that, the functional advisory board gives a high level status of what's going on in all 3 domains of USIMS. And we love to have people there and ask questions and have conversations. So, oh, sorry, I hit the mic. Okay. With that, I'm going to turn the time over to Mark Waddups, who is our product owner for the student domain.
I hesitate putting this on because my wife likes to tell me I have the loudest quiet voice she's ever heard. And what that means is that she's like, you'll be speaking softly, but your voice like carries. Will you keep it down? All right. So hopefully I'll look to you, Lista, if this is too loud, just let me know. Okay. Let's see here, we're going to skip this. Okay. So what I wanted to do today is to give you, first of all, I'm Mark Waddups, product owner, as Katrina mentioned before, and I'm going to give you an overview of kind of what our domain covers. We'll talk about roadmap, and we'll talk about, as she mentioned, some of the API direction that we're going. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions. Feel free to raise your hand. Let's keep this like kind of an open discussion. I do have some time at the end of these slides for some questions, but feel free to raise your hand or interrupt me. Yeah, rather than just read these, I think I covered most of that. want to give you as the LEAs an understanding of what we're trying to do in the student domain, but more importantly, for those of you here to understand, some of you have reached out saying, hey, do we have any updates on what data standard we're looking to move towards? We've talked about, CIF, EdFi, one roster. We hear all of these terms being thrown out there. Okay. Before we do that, I want to kind of cover what our student domain does. So although the student backpack legislation affects some of our other groups, it really, a big chunk of this falls into my team's domain. And you can really, in my opinion, you can sum this up into about 3 or 4 areas. We're really looking to make, USIMS that state source for a comprehensive learner e-transcript. So something that the student moves from one LEA to another, that data moves with them. And as many of you know who deal with this, that's a taller task than you might think, right? Or that on the surface you might think. Transfer of learner information across LEAs, that's kind of falls into that. A repository for learner information reporting. We're trying to get at the state just the information that we need for reporting and for what the legislation is asking for, right? And as part of that, it can be difficult sometimes because many of you are using different student information systems or SISs in each of your LEAs. So that can kind of be a challenge and why we need to move more towards a real-time or near real-time exchange of information, a two-way exchange of information between those systems. And then last is, in everything we're doing, we're looking at the security of the data that we're moving. In other words, it isn't just about, hey, are we using, encryption or, tokenization, some of these other, technical buzzwords you may have heard, but it's all about also looking at, are we just sending to our vendors, for instance, the data that we need? So an example would be right now we're working, and I'll get to this, we're working on assessments and being that, on behalf of the LEAs, being that kind of conduit to roster students and to get those assessment results back for many different purposes, up to and including for accountability reporting and federal reporting mandates that we have. So how do we ensure that we're just sending the information that we need to? We're currently looking at RISE, and with our vendor Cambium, we're trying to minimize, hey, if we're sending these 35 fields, do we really need to send all those, or are there efficiencies that we can now create within USIMS, because we're starting with a new system where we don't have to send that. Poor Aaron's group has had a number of workarounds because we're working with systems that are just been built over time and they get old and disparate. Any questions on that before I go forward? I don't want this just me monologuing if you have questions.
There is a question in the chat.
Okay.
So LEAs currently go through a never-ending cycle of submitting data to the collector, resolving errors, resubmitting, repeating over and over again is necessary. This process is labor-intensive and ineffective. Is there anything with the new design of USIMS that will allow LEAs to validate data and resolve errors before submitting data?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say the short answer is yes. How we do that is something that we're going to have to work through. Yes, Paul.
Would you repeat the question? We couldn't quite hear.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if you can see it.
If you click on the chat,
Right there.
this is the little 8.
You were pointing there. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I can't see it. I'll just see a chat. This is.
Close, you're gonna have to shout. Read the question.
Okay, why don't you do this?
Never mind.
I'll make you.
Okay. The question is, LEAs currently go through a never-ending cycle of submitting data to the collector, resolving errors, resubmitting, and repeating over and over again as necessary. This process is labor-intensive and ineffective. Is there anything with the new design of USIMS that will allow LEAs to validate data and resolve errors before submitting data?
Oh, you didn't have a response for that, right? I'm just teasing.
I might.
Okay, I'll respond to it and then I'll come back to Cliff if you.
There's another mic.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you, does this work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see it blue's on, but it's blinking, so I don't know if it's. I'll answer that first and then I'll. I think from a USIM standpoint, as a theme, we're trying to find ways, in fact, we were just talking about this yesterday in our meetings. How can we find ways to, one, exchange information in near real time? So a simple example would be when a student registers or your registrar is entering a new student into an SIS system. How can we at least make available APIs and architect those in a way that there's not a lot of, it's not an expensive call, if that makes sense to this audience. That we can do a quick real-time check that when they hit submit, that you can go out through an API and check and see if that person exists in the current system or in USIMS. If they don't, be able to return a response that says, hey, is this the same Johnny? And there's maybe 5 or 6 different Johnnies within the state that now a person can look at and has the information to be able to troubleshoot that. So I think that's one way. I think another is we're looking at ways that when data is submitted, can we do some at least initial validation without getting into, deep data evaluation or validation that maybe Utrecht does. Go ahead.
But before you start, Alan Shakespeare responded and say, I'm going to speak aloud, hopefully the microphone's picking it up.
You want this?
No. Real-time exchange means that error correction is real-time, not a submit, wait, check, submit, wait, check.
Thank you.
Process. Go ahead, Cliff.
Yeah, they're stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
The part about before submitting, that just isn't feasible because at that point it only exists in SIS. When you submit it, then we have a chance to compare it, evaluate it, determine what's going on with it. But if it happens on a daily basis, opportunities are there. So we could do is take that a lot more back and forth throughout the day. Have hot calls sort of thing every time there's a change.
Yeah, and in fairness to Cliff and Utrecht, like I have the advantage of, or our team does, in starting from scratch and being able to learn from years of experience with Utrecht and how we improve that. Any other questions?
Can say that some of the parts about making it less painful, I'll try to hit in my session later.
There was a question about API, what that means, and it was answered in the chat, but others.
Okay, yeah.
So we can do a quiz. There's no prizes. What does API stand for? Okay, he wins. Sam?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know how technical some of the people in our audience are, but think of it, I like to think of it in layman's terms like 2 chords. You have, you need to be able to plug in your extension cord into another cord. That's kind of what APIs do. And the information is the electricity, excuse me, that travels across those wires. So hopefully that helps. So So given that, we, as part of our efforts to modernize, yes, go ahead.
So back to this question on real time, you say
Near real time.
near real time.
Yeah, I want to emphasize that because I don't want to set the expectation that it's going to be instant, but we will look at ways that we can do that better, whether that's, you know, the information we're asking for is smaller, but we do it in process spurts.
So I guess what I was saying is, the idea is that registrar and all whatever enters a student, so they get saved, something gets sent to the state, doesn't matter, check. What happens on the school site if there is an error? Who gets the error? What format does it show up in?
Yeah.
To our SIS suddenly happens. Sorry, you didn't know the state said no. I mean,
Right.
fix this piece of information. Like, what is
Yeah.
the user experience that when there is an error?
Excellent question.
And repeat the question on the mic, so
Oh,
I can
okay.
hear. I don't know if they can hear from the back.
I don't know if I could I'm going to try and rephrase what you just asked for people on the. So the question was, what's the user experience going to be like? So what's that? Sorry.
Like, just in case another question.
So the question was, essentially, and tell me if I'm wrong here, but the question is, what's the user experience like if, in the example, a registrar goes and puts in that, you know, goes to register a student, hits submit or save, and you know, the state comes, you know, a check goes out to the state and comes back through that API interface and says, you know, is this correct? The answer to that question is we still have to work out what that user experience is. I can tell you that our intention at this point, we're still in the beginning stages of this, and I'll get to that in just a moment. But our intention is to work with, you know, we start with one SIS and we work through that. The user interface and that experience we see as in that exchange or in that situation being up to the SISs. We can only provide the information, but we don't want to supersede what the state's doing. Now, that being said, our intention also is, I don't want to get too far ahead here, but our intention is to be able to give select users the opportunity to say, okay, we sent this via API. I want to verify that the information I'm seeing here in this SIS is the same that I'm seeing in the state. So we have to work through that, I think, a little bit. So I don't know that I gave you the answer you wanted, but that's the intention or the strategy and approach to that. Any other questions on that? Yes, Paul?
I would just. I was just thinking, as a user, wouldn't want to stop them from enrolling a student. We just want to
That's right.
give them some feedback about the data, because we don't want to stop them enrolling.
Yeah, and the approach is too that, I mean, the registrar sitting right there, they're going to have a better idea of what the situation's like. And so our approach is we're leveraging technology, but we're not cutting the individual out. So, you know, just to piggyback off of Paula's comments there, we obviously don't want to stop the registration from happening. So it's not like we're coming back and saying, you know, we won't accept this. It's more of, hey, let's provide you more information so you can troubleshoot and we can avoid creating duplicate records, which many of you know is, you know, in our current processes is a challenge. Mm-hmm.
That's the whole thing is. Way louder than Mike. So. If a registrar puts in a student, they're going to do the best they can.
That's right.
That's the same person, the same person. It's creating a new one now. So that stuff's not going away.
Right.
But all your SSID stuff's gonna end up having to work the same. You're always gonna have an SSID first.
go and fix those over there.
Yes, but we hope that we can minimize some of that by, you know, like, I don't want to get into too much detail, but one idea would be, you know, for those of you that, you know, work with deep with technology, you know that there's what we would call an expense to going and getting information. So if we go out and we say, hey, we're going to go verify every field that you just entered, you know, in your SIS for this particular student, we're going to go out and check all of that. That can take a little bit of time to get a response back. If we're talking like 2 minutes, that's kind of unacceptable, right? So then our teams are going to have to figure out, like, if we go down that path, what is the biggest bang for our data we can get? So that it's a quicker check, and we may just be, like I described, going out and checking to see if there are other students, and maybe we display, say you got Johnny Smith, and there's 8 of those within the state. We could at least have some type of experience where we can at least present that back, but we would have to work through the SISs to do that. So a lot of these things they're great questions, and they're things that we have to work out. And we're not at a stage yet where we can do that. I mean, I'll get into this, but we're in the beginning stages of creating a registered student API. And, you know, we're going to work actually we just started discussions with Paula and her team because it's, you know, internal, we can do that and, you know, test some of these things out before we talk to the other.
I'm just stating that
Yeah.
because we don't want anybody thinking they're gonna lose their job.
Oh, no, and that's a great point. And that's why I was trying to emphasize that the technology is being leveraged so that the human beings, like the registrar who's there, can actually assess the situation and make some assessments, right? We don't want to have a user experience, in my mind, where we're sending data back and we're stopping them from being able to upload information to the state, right? The SIS still have control over all that.
I think we also have a great opportunity here for allowing USIMs to use machine learning capabilities to start understanding, okay, here's who you enroll, here's how you enroll, here's the standard student, and we can allow you to enroll as many, you know, people as you need, and then we on the back end can take a look at that and say, it looks like these people might be the same person, and bring it back to the registrar later to say, hey, did you want to merge these records? Is this right? And the process right now is really manual and overhead, right? You have to send an email to the other LEA, and you have to talk to the USBE help desk, and you have to do this, you have to do that. And we can smooth that process, right? We can make everything within USIMS so that you really have that experience of, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, that's definitely the same person. Here's all their records, here's all their information. It's served up for me, and I can verify that, and it can handle everything on the back end, and we can reduce that manual process. And then as time goes on, as we get better and we can nail that down, right? We can start improving that experience. We'll be able to introduce ways that we could potentially get rid of some of this duplication and offer a solution that would help over the long run. We know we're not getting rid of SSID right off the bat. There are too many systems, too many places where that is required.
Yeah.
So we're going to work with what we've got for right now and build in pieces that make life easier. And then ideally down the road, we'll start being able to remove some of that redundancy.
Yeah, and I just want to emphasize too, I mean, for those of you that don't know how that process works today, as a registrar, you know, enters their information in the SIS, and if they don't have some type of API connection, then they have to go out to the SSID portal and either manually enter those or bulk upload those. And then, you know, in some cases, LEA doesn't find out that a student isn't entered into the system until they do a nightly upload to Utrex. Well, there's a gap in between that time, and a registrar is just trying to enter and get students in the system, and they may have multiple tasks or responsibilities. And so we want to to Katrina's point, we can use and leverage technology to the hope is to kind of narrow that gap between when you get feedback. But again, a lot of that's going to depend on the SISs and such. But okay, I'm going to move on here because I want to make sure that we cover some of the technical direction that we're going. So this emphasis we're talking about on APIs and that two-way exchange of information instead of one way where we're moving data to the state and then trying to reconcile. We're starting with what's called EdFi. So some of you have, and some of your colleagues have reached out and said, hey, we need to know sooner than later. Are we going to continue with, some of you are using like a SIF format. There may be other formats or questions that you have, but we're going to start with EdFi, and I'll explain why we're going to start with that standard. And we will add other capabilities as we go. The way I like to think of it is like, Windows, or if you're using like a Mac or something of that nature, it would be the same type of analogy, in that we start with one and develop for, say, Windows, and then develop additional software for Macintosh. Any questions on that? Part of the reason that we're doing that, you can see here, we're doing it because we need to, not just for the reasons that we talked about, but we want to ensure that exchange of information between the SIS and the state is secure, that we're protecting that data. We want to reduce the manual validation that tends to happen ad hoc, where people are trying to look at data. And just like was mentioned earlier, we want to take the manual tasks that people are doing and automate those so that you have the time to focus on the things that only your people are skilled to do. It's not a matter of replacing, it's a matter of enhancing and giving better tools for people to be able to use. Is kind of the amount of that.
Yeah.
CUM files between, yeah, go ahead.
Are there any plans in the future to have some kind of digital sharing of student CUM files between LEAs?
I don't have an answer for that, but that's something that we could look at in the future if we can capture that. And this is being recorded, so yeah, I couldn't tell you specifically on that at this point. But if I don't know who made that comment, but you're welcome to reach out to me, and you'll see here in the slides I'm talking about. There are some ways that we'll try and keep continual communication going back and forth. What I don't want to do is have our teams delivering at the end saying, here's a full documentation of our APIs. We want to make those available as we go, not because we're going to implement right away, but because we want to familiarize each of the LEAs and those that are supporting the SISs what we're planning to do and how that's going to work. Okay. Now, part of the reason that's driving us moving to kind of EdFi is we're also trying to standardize our information, within USIMS. And this really boils down to just having one central, in concept, kind of a central way to be able to organize our data. As it stands now, you have different systems within our ecosystem that all have, they may track or store information differently. So you may call one and this, I'm going to use fruit because my dad was in the apple business for a second. So you may have Red Delicious and Golden Delicious. You may have a Gala apple. They're all apples, but they're slightly different, and they may be called something different. And when you start doing that at scale, it becomes really difficult to manage your data. So this allows us to have that common data model, the same vocabulary. It also allows us a lot more flexibility within our systems to store and use our data in ways that are specific to user needs.
Okay, a question from online. When is the projected rollout of Ed5?
Great question. So we're in the first stages of working through assessments. In fact, I'm just going to jump there. Okay, this is essentially the scope of what, at a very high level of what we're looking to cover by, when I say cover, this is kind of the roadmap for our deadline is, July 1st of 2024. And so to come back to that question, we're at this stage right now with the technical foundation for assessments. So I can't give you a definite answer other than I can tell you we're pushing to have the capabilities in place, that Ed5 suite, API suite, if you want to call it that, by July 1st of 2024. But again, I want to emphasize, we're not talking about live data exchange. We're talking about the capability, the infrastructure, and the basically the road built out for us to be able to do that. Yeah, that's why I'm trying to cruise through this. I'm gonna bypass some of these slides. I think what I would emphasize is just what I was saying, is that we're not going to have, we're, as Katrina mentioned, we're taking an agile approach, and that kind of gets overused a lot for a lot of different things. But the intention in this application is that we will continue to communicate with you and with contacts with the SIS. I wanted to have this conversation more formally with this group before we officially start reaching out to some of our other SISs like Power School. We've already talked a little bit to Skyward. They're asking for specifics that we don't have at this point, but we've committed that we will, through standing meetings that we have today, through our functional advisory board, and through a website that or at least a URL we're going to publish as it becomes available, all of this API documentation, so that your SISs and the LEAs have a heads up on kind of what's coming as it's coming off the press. If you have, and where we are right now, as I mentioned before, we're working through assessments. We are, under Katrina's leadership, we're going to be spinning up or creating a second team so we can speed up our delivery. But the intention is that one team will be working through assessments and how we do that. And many of your questions fall into this category, which we'll be working on. Any questions? I don't want to steal time from Don there, but if you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to me through email. I'm happy to provide my email either at any time during this conference, and you can reach out to me and I'd be happy to answer your questions. Correct. Yep, that's correct. So the question was, when I'm talking about assessments, I'm talking, he was asking if we're talking about between the state and the vendor and not the LEAs, and that is correct. We're talking about that exchange between the vendor and the state. Okay. Yeah, we'll go ahead and turn the time over to Doug.
Morning, everyone. My name is Don Moody, and I am the product owner with the finance domain in USIMS. So I'm just going to talk a couple of different slides here. Just kind of give an overview of the finance domain. One of our main goals is the data sharing between how the LEAs share their financial information to USIMS or to USBE today. We want to automate that as much as we can through USIMS. In the very first focus working group that we had with the LEA members, that was complaint number one, or that was issue number one that was raised to us. The LEAs were saying like, hey, I've got to send information, I've got to send budget information, I've got to send transaction information to USBE, and then I've got to turn around and send it to the state auditor. It's the same thing. Why can't you guys are the state of Utah, why can't you talk? So one of our main goals is to automate that sharing, using APIs to get that information into USIMS. And at the point that we have that information, then USBE can go to the state auditor and say like, hey, we have information, let's talk. And so we can reduce that data load between the two groups.
There's a question.
Sure.
Why isn't everyone using USB chart of accounts?
Why is it?
Your mind reader now not.
That so I guess in an ideal, there are a couple states that I've been aware of that everyone uses the same chart of accounts, but from my understanding, every LEA, I mean, they are their own organization, and how they categorize their revenue and expenses is up to them. Now, if an LEA chooses to use the USB chart of accounts, that would obviously make their submissions, it would make the submissions part of it easier for the LEAs, and it would make it easier for USB to do that. Like the reason why the mapping it's an onerous process today for both the BAs at the schools, and also it's time consuming on the USB side, is because we're trying to do the apples to apples comparison to make sure that, okay, that when USB reports out information on, okay, across all of the LEAs, here's how they're getting revenue, here's what they're making, here's what they're spending their money on, that we can do that comparison, because there's a lot of reporting that information that needs to be shared with the Department of Education and other entities. So that's why the mapping between the LEA chart of accounts and the USB chart of accounts needs to happen. So again, like we'll talk about kind of where the finance domain is, how we'll do that information sharing between the LEAs and USB and USIMS through using APIs. And then we'll talk about a couple of the benefits of both to you at the LEAs and also to USB. Hopefully, in the long run, the idea, USIMS will make your life easier on the sharing financial information. So again, we talked a little bit on the overview here of, we're going to try to digitalize the financial operations. Right now, the team is working on, building out the API. We've actually built the infrastructure of the API endpoint, and we're working on finalizing the language of the API is going to be our endpoint, and how we expect the format of information. And that's using Ed5 standards on that. So that's how we're going to automate that information sharing. And also, when we talked about, like, we want to, there's a lot of different, we saw earlier in the slides of a lot of different systems across USB. And so, the goal here on the USIMS side is to make USIMS that the single source of truth on the finance side, at least. And that's, again, it's a long way to get there, but that is our end goal. And like I said, we're working on the submissions of, we're working right now on the budget submissions and how to automate how that is through APIs. We'll be doing that we're actually about to release a revised API to our vendor partners. And over the feedback that we've got from the vendors is that it typically takes, once they've confirmed that, okay, yeah, this API makes sense, it takes them a couple of months to do the development on their end. And then we can start Once they've got an endpoint, once we have our endpoint, then we can start sharing information between the LEAs and USIMS on that. So we're looking forward to getting underway with that. Once we automate the budget submissions, obviously the next step is to work on the transaction level information, and that won't be like a real time, like as transactions are occurring. And that's, when I say transactions, that's more probably I would think of that as more kind of at the journal entry level on kind of like at the end of the day, okay, here's the transactions that are happening. This will simplify, how you at the LEAs are handling, how you handle your submissions, and also help with USBE to keep more up to date and real time on the information that they're receiving. And the idea with USIMS is to, with all this automation, we can free up our financial analysts to do more financial based information rather than tracking down files or looking at different spreadsheets. USIMS will allow them to do what they do best, and that's more on the analysis side. So again, we've talked about using the APIs, using the API endpoints to automate that information sharing. As I said, we're using the Ed 5 standards, and we've got the capabilities. We have our I call it like building the foundation. We've got the foundation built. We did an initial launch of our finance API and got some good feedback from one of our vendor partners on they were like, hey, what standards are we using for this? And we went back and revisited the Ed 5 standards and made some modifications to what our API is asking for. So again, that's, we changed the format of the information, and we're in the process over the next few weeks of releasing that version. I call it version 2.0 of the finance API, okay, to automate those budget submissions. And like I said, we're working right now. There's 3 vendors that we're working with right now, and that's kind of wave 1. It's Skyward, Polaris, and Tyler Technologies. And the reason those are the 3 vendors we're working with initially is because they're also vendors that are they were awarded, or they are candidates to help LEAs that are on QuickBooks or other offline systems to potentially work with LEAs to upgrade those into a platform that is USIMS compatible, that has API capabilities. So that's why we're focusing on those 3 vendors to start with. And after, in the next couple of months, as we get any feedback during that initial launch, we'll work with the other vendor partner, the Skywards. Harris has a number of tools as well. So we'll kind of work with them in phase 2. So like I said, we're going to do the budget submissions first and then work towards the obvious next step is the automation of transaction level information, and be able to share that as well. So I'll pause there. And any questions real quick before I talk about the benefits? And I had included a couple of slides here and in our focus working group, we've actually done a couple of demos for how the chart of accounts is, how it will look in USIMS. And we're in the we've shown demos in our local development environments, and we're in the process over the next couple of weeks in getting that deployed to an environment that you at the LEAs can actually look at. Okay, you can actually navigate the 2023 chart of accounts, take a look at it. And as the 2024 chart of accounts gets released in the next couple of months, as the legislative session ends, and as the USBE Finance Department looks at, okay, what are the changing legislative mandates? What are the changes that we need to make to the chart of accounts? We will put those 2024 changes online and make it available, at least in a test environment that you all can take a look at. So as far as the benefits of USIMS, for the LEAs, we're trying to, again, it's that one-stop shop for information, that one-stop shop for where you can submit information, and also, again, simplify the process for you guys and improve the quality of data. both the quality of data, that you have better confidence in the data that's coming in, and that the USB, can look at the data. And as I said earlier, they can look at rather than combing through data and looking through spreadsheets, they can spend their time doing what they do best and do more value add work on the analysis side. So at that point, that's the main gist of what I wanted to discuss with you all today. Thank you very much for having me here. Was there any other questions that anyone had?
Okay. Thank you. We got 5 minutes to spare. Mostly. We'll be transitioning for online to the next Zoom meeting, so feel free to join us over there. 5-minute break as we transition over. So 10-minute break technically before we get there. So thank you, everyone. By the way, USIMS team, thank you so much for being here. I don't know, you guys are just busy. When I say you guys, I'm talking about the meet, everyone in the room is like, what they're talking about is going to change how we do everything. I feel like we're getting on a roller coaster. We're not ready to start going all over the place. It's like, this is gonna be intense. Right now, we're like, there's a lot of we don't knows right now, but this will definitely be transforming everything. I mean, that's the whole point. It is definitely transforming what we're doing at the state. And as this transforms, it should be impacting you guys quite a bit. I was expecting you guys to get up and shout and scream and cheer and carry them off on your shoulder. Okay. Anyway, thank you. 10-minute break. Here we go. Thanks. We turned the light on. Thank you. I'm gonna end the meeting. Are we good? Or did you save it?
You don't need to record it in the cloud, so it